Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm JJ Bull, your host today. Yes, and today I am joined in the studio by John Mackenzie.
Hello.
No dog.
No dog?
No.
No.
Also, all the way from Germany. How is your gates, Seb?
That was horrifying. That's absolutely horrifying.
I realised I don't know how to say it in German straight away, and I did something which is on the verge of,
I mean, we've learned the lesson about staying in our comfort zone. I am well, JJ Bull. Thank you for asking.
Those of you watching the podcast rather than listening will be able to see in the little top corner of the screen there, Seb's cat. What's the cat called?
That's Luca.
It's called Seb. Seb and his cat Seb. That's Luca, actually. Hello, Luca. And also joined by us in the studio is Tim Spiers. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Tim is a journalist for The Athletic. He's very good, aren't you?
Not for me to say.
In the top 5, would you say?
No.
No? Okay, well, we brought him in because we think he's the best. And today we're going to talk about all the football that happened, all the things that we like, the things that we were interested in. And I'm sure many of you listening are very interested in football. And if you are interested in football, you should subscribe to The Athletic. And if you go to theathletic.com/Tifo, oh baby, there's a deal on right now, which is, I think, like always, a 30-day free trial. So you can just try it without paying for it for 30 days. What have you read recently, John?
I read a piece by Big Tim Spiers.
Top 5 journalist.
About Nuno, the future of Nuno. So Nuno's now out in the Middle East, having a grand old time, but quite the shift, really, from Wolves to Spurs to them.
This is Nuno Espirito Santo.
That's right, yeah.
And what do you think of him?
I think he's just a bit wasted in Saudi Arabia. I don't know what your, Saudi Arabian football knowledge is like.
Very high. And so we're going to talk about Saudi Arabian football. We're going to talk about Premier League things, lots of that. It's going to be a great show. I think it's going to be tremendous. So we're going to do that. I'm going to stop doing silly voices. I'm in a funny mood all of a sudden. So let's start with games. So let's go and do games. Here we go. Newcastle United 3-3 Manchester City. What a game. Let's go with Seb. Seb, what do you make of this game? What's happened?
Oh, it was fun. If you could produce an advert for the Premier League or what the Premier League thought of itself, that's kind of the game, isn't it? Just like impossible intensity, goals, fun, atmosphere. It was extraordinarily high quality. You know what, JJ? I thought for most of the game, because when Newcastle went 3-1 up, you felt like they were playing on quite a lot of adrenaline. So you're waiting for that point at which it would subside and then Manchester City would take control. And that happened a little bit, but not nearly to the extent that I thought it was going to. But it's just really entertaining. And it's kind of, if I'm a Newcastle fan, the start of the season hasn't, it's been a little bit mixed. They've played pretty well, but the results have been mixed. I've been so encouraged by that because there was no inferiority complex, which, let's be fair, if you're facing that Man City and you've got Haaland and I think a Newcastle team of a couple of years ago would have just lapsed into a kind of, not even a 4-5-1, but a 5-5 and just hope for the best and left Saint-Maximin up front by himself. It's kind of a reminder they're a really different team. It's just a lot of different components now and a lot of different sort of utility within it. And they were great. They played really, really well.
It's also like 3-3 is not the kind of score I'd associate with Man City taking on Newcastle. And it's not fair to say it's like a basketball game back and forth, but there's a lot less control that City had than what they'd normally have. John?
Yeah, I was surprised at how intense Newcastle were, really, because I don't think I've seen them press quite so high and quite so intensely for
They leave
the
like
whole
three defenders at the back just to deal with 3 or 4 Man City players. It's super hard to push that.
Yeah, and I wonder whether or not this is something we're going to see more and more with teams coming up against Man City, which is if you can make the game more transitional, if you can make it more back and forth, then you're almost leveling the playing field a little bit. Obviously, Man City have great players, and everyone sort of knew that it was inevitable that they would get back into it. But what I found so fascinating was that even when Man City were coming back at Newcastle, they were still happy to press high and they were playing really aggressive football. And obviously, we need to talk about Allan Saint-Maximin, who just sort of ran that City defence ragged.
It was outrageous. He was just, it's the best I've seen
really
him play.
good.
Well, he's so fun to watch, right?
Yeah.
On Saint-Maximin. So he's really fun to watch. His output is still, it just doesn't, that's what stops him from being a proper top level player. is that he's got all the dribbly boy skills, really fast. He accelerates from 0 to whatever, like 90 in about 1 second. There's no slow build up. He's just instantly there with acceleration, which makes him so hard to deal with. And because he's got that centre of balance where you can turn players inside out, you can see Walker wasn't really enjoying it. But then I wonder whether a lot of focus has been on these interior fullbacks that he's playing, having Walker and Cancelo pushed inside, which was leaving. They're very narrow in this game, as seen when you look back at it, which leaving loads of space wide where the wide midfielders were going into. Which again, when you do that, then you have to have Saint-Maximin and who's other. Almiron was playing central right as well, and then you push into the wide areas outside of them. Is that where a lot of the joy came from?
You have a lot of joy. Sorry, John.
I was just going to say that the reason why managers like Pep invert their fullbacks to a certain extent is because they don't want to cede any space in the middle. And obviously, as you've said, the result of that is that you end up giving space in the wide areas. Now, usually that's fine because it's a longer. If you play the ball into the channel, your defensive unit can drop back and it's a shorter distance to goal than the attacking players who have to go out wide and then come back into the goal. And that's usually fine. But in this game, the issue is that as soon as you are giving Allan Saint-Maximin time on the ball to just get up speed, he could just run at people one-on-one. And there were so many times in that game where you'd see one City player attempt to jump in and then he's round them. And then the next player comes across and you get these sorts of chains then where you're just running for your life trying to stop this guy, and he just
Wilson's
pulled them to
goal
pieces.
was just like Saint-Maximin running straight at them, right?
Yeah.
And then I think it's only him and Wilson up top against 4 or 5 City players.
Yeah.
I mean, is that, Tim, would you say this is something of a blueprint for how to beat City, or just a one-off tactical plan that worked very well, or was it just momentum? What was it?
Well, not many teams have an Alain Saint-Maximin type player, I guess. I felt like City did underestimate Newcastle a little bit, and there didn't seem to be a plan to take care of Saint-Maximin.
In what way did they underestimate them? Do you see it in the performance from the start, or what do you think happened?
Just the fact that he was able to isolate defenders pretty easily, so it seemed like City were very much just focused on what they wanted to do, and like you were saying, leaving those gaps out wide for Saint-Maximin to exploit. But then I think I personally probably underestimated Newcastle a little bit. You look at a week before, I think they had 4 shots against Brighton and 1 on target. I do think they need some creative reinforcements in those forward areas. Saint-Maximin is very inconsistent. He won't do that every week. Almiron's not going to score you a lot of goals. Callum Wilson probably going to get injured at some point. But I was surprised at how they were able to create chances and obviously score 3 against City.
Well, there was a thing I was trying to do a video on a while ago with Newcastle, and I found the numbers. Let me see if I can find the numbers, because they are good for Newcastle stats, like in terms of their creativity. So they're trying to buy a striker. So they've got someone who can help out Callum Wilson when he's not around, whatever. But the problem for me with them is that it's in their creativity. So they don't really create many chances. I think last season, the chances created in open play, Saint-Maximin had the most by far, 33 over the whole season. This is actually, no, since Eddie Howe came in charge. So I looked at stats from when he joined, whichever month that was, November maybe? Yeah, I think so. And so in that time, it's about 27 games Howe was in charge for. And then you had Saint-Maximin's 33 chances in open play created in that time. Then behind him, the next most creative player is Joelinton on 23. He's a ball-winning midfielder now, which doesn't really make sense. And then below them, you've got Ryan Fraser, Jacob Murphy, Joe Willock, all much lower numbers. And on the FBref, Saint-Maximin has the highest expected assists all season last year, 5.8. The next closest is Ryan Fraser on 2.2. That immediately see what the problems are. There's no creative players, so you'd be looking for surely some sort of winger or advanced playmakers. They're playing a 3 in the middle, so it means you maybe have your creativity coming from wide. Don't know what they're looking for. What do they need?
Yeah, I think it's the age-old problem, isn't it? If you have a player like Allan Saint-Maximin, you're going to try and use them as much as possible. And so there can be a tendency for these non-top 6 sides, because I think we still have to call Newcastle that. I don't know how long that will continue, but for them to have a standout player and for all of the creativity to go through them. As we saw the same with Leeds and Vitinha last season. And I think the real trick that Newcastle are going to have now is starting to develop more flexibility through the team so that they can have that creativity coming through. What we've seen happen with Arsenal this season, I think. In previous seasons, Arsenal have been way too right side heavy because they've been reliant on players like Odegaard and Saka on that side. And now it feels as though they genuinely have creative options on the left-hand side. And that just makes them a much more dangerous option, because I guess that the thing is that teams that figure out how to defend against Saint-Maximin, if you can do that, and obviously that's a big if. But if you can do that, then you are stopping Newcastle's main source of creativity. And that's what I agree with Tim. I don't think Man City did a good job of stopping Saint-Maximin getting the ball in controlled possession and then being able to run at players. And that was where they really struggled in that game.
Seb, I think you said in the WhatsApp group chat that when they put Chris Wood on, they lost a lot of mobility up front, and that changed the way Newcastle were playing, almost probably negatively.
Yeah, because I think Wilson's a really big part of Saint-Maximin's form. So what's interesting, if you think about sort of City's default attacking shape, was that kind of 2-3-5 that Guardiola likes to set up. Now, like the area of the Newcastle side which is most potent is that little triangle between Joelinton. Brazilians pronounce his name Joelinton. Someone should get in touch and tell us if we're right about that.
Joelinton, I think.
Joelinton, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Joelinton, yes, very much a ball-winning player now, but he's also quite vertical when he has the ball to the left side of the midfield. Wilson likes that area too, and obviously Saint-Maximin likes that sort of area right against the touchline. And so against a team like City, who are always going to commit a few men forward, you're going to have a mismatch in that area. And Wilson's pace is a huge problem. How many times have you seen Kyle Walker struggle for pace? And that's a little bit to do with Saint-Maximin, but it's also to do with the fact that he's got 3 players who want to go forward as quickly as possible on the ball. And I just felt, as I said in the WhatsApp, like it's not necessarily that Chris Wood is an inferior player, it's just the contrast is too great. It signifies a completely different approach. Like Chris Wood's not a mobile player really, he's effective in his own way. But I think the important thing with Wilson is to have, like Tim said earlier, like his injury history is problematic, but having cover which is stylistically similar so that you don't lose that attacking dynamic when he goes off or when he has to be replaced, or when even if you want an extra man at the back and if you want that out ball, make sure you maintain the attacking avenue and don't quite have that right now.
Yeah, you put Wood there. He's more of a player that can play his back to goal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the obvious thing to say. But when you have Wilson, you can play on the break with Newcastle and have a goal threat when you can make use of Almiron and Saint-Maximin making the runs, because you've got a boy in the middle who can get and play at pace and do that. If you play Wood, he almost becomes withdrawn, and we have to let Almiron and Saint-Maximin then become the central forwards. But that's where they get let down, because both of those are output is so low. Because
also you want a centre forward, like Wilson's a big guy too. Like you want a centre forward who's going to draw defensive attention, because that's really like when Saint-Maximin is asked to do too much by himself, he becomes almost like a parody of himself. That's where the memes come from and the kind of the overindulgent touches. What you want is him moving into space, not receiving the ball at standing start and then taking players on. It's a completely different player, and so it's nothing against Chris Wood. I mean, I'm not trying to denigrate him as a player. He's a useful Premier League footballer, but it's just not quite right in terms of squad balance. That's all.
John, Pep after the game, like he's been mate. Guardiola after the game said he spoke about the lack of control, and the thing I found most interesting about it was mentioning how I think he said Phil Foden and Holland was it? Yeah. So they were really direct and attacking, and they want to make things happen. But if you'd had Grealish or Mahrez or Bernardo Silva playing on those wide areas, they'd have slowed things down. Because that means they have better control of it. Can you explain what this means, what he's talking about?
Yeah, I'm always reminded of the first game that Leeds and Man City played when Leeds were promoted, and it was Bielsa versus Pep Guardiola. And I think what was so fascinating about that game was that Bielsa was really good at getting City to play the way that Leeds were going to benefit from most. So they made it really transitional. They made it like lots of turnovers, back and forth, stopping City from having control. And I think that is probably City's weak spot. If you can get them playing in those moments, obviously they're still going to be great because they've got such great players in transitional moments. But you take away a little bit of the control, and you're starting to level the playing field a little bit. And I think that was what Newcastle did so well. I think that Eddie Howe had a really good match approach, which was to try and get the game as destabilized as possible, make it chaotic. And I think that's what Pep was talking about at the end. He was like, we need to get our forward players holding the ball for longer, slowing the game down, maintaining possession, maintaining control. And that's one way that, you keep the ball away from Saint-Maximin. And so obviously, like if the more transitional it is, the more likely Newcastle are to just keep finding that channel with Saint-Maximin in it. Yeah. But also that it just starts shifting the game state towards a situation that is going to benefit City more.
That's it, because you have like Grealish wide left. I think this season, and I think a lot of last season, people have talked about how he hasn't looked to have been hugely effective. Maybe not as good as he would have been for Aston Villa, but by having Grealish there rather than someone like Foden's more like to go forward straight away, whereas Grealish seems to take loads and loads of touches, but it slows everything down, which then means they can get the rest of the players in position to be able to maintain the counterattacks. It's a weird way of thinking about it, is that the attacking players are almost the most defensive because you're trying to slow them down right at source.
I think managers like Pep and Julian Nagelsmann, they lie awake at night worrying about defensive transition. That's what, because they're ultimately control managers. They know that if they can retain control of the game, they're going to win more often than not. And so this is the sort of thing that will have kept Guardiola up last night, being like, how did we not manage to stop them from having so many transitions?
Well, another manager who's up all night is probably Thomas Tuchel, because, Tim, Chelsea got done 3-0 by Leeds. What's going on at Chelsea? What's happening?
It was good fun, wasn't it?
It was good fun.
I enjoyed that. I was incredibly hungover watching this game. I said that from the outset. And
what stage of hungover were you? Lying down on the sofa hungover? Or?
Just progressed from the bed to the sofa, which was a big moment. And honestly, genuinely, I'm not exaggerating here. Watching Leeds' pressing made me feel worse because my eyes were having to try and keep up with them. It was ridiculous. I was so impressed with Leeds. I wasn't sure that they had that in them. But it very much seems like a lot of things came together on the day at the right time.
What were those things? What did they do so well?
For the first time under Jesse Marsch, and particularly the way that they were playing vertically, their pressing was ridiculous, and they put Chelsea
so much energy
into all kinds of problems. Obviously, the classic example being the opening goal where Mendes just had nowhere to go. Well, he should have booted it in the stands, but probably not allowed to do that.
Well, I think this is interesting, this Mendy bit, right? So we did a video in the weekend after the match, and I agree that Mendy made the error by not kicking it away early enough. But I think you can see that when he receives a ball from Gallagher, that's the high press from Leeds that forces the ball back. It's the only option Gallagher's got, really. This is to put it back. And then James, Silva, Koulibaly, and Cucurella stand and watch him because they think he's going to boot it. They think he is, but he thinks they're going to fall back into position. I think they've been told to offer the short pass out. You're trying to bypass the press and take Leeds out of position. That's what you want them to do, right? But they don't do it. And so my question to you is it actually Mendy's fault? I think it's a bit of both.
I don't think so. I think if you watch the start of the game, that's what Leeds were doing constantly. So surely the defenders should be aware that they need to create that option and that and spot the danger. But nobody else seemed to spot the danger.
Yeah.
But yeah, he should have booted it into the stands. But does he get fined for that? Is that like 2 weeks' wages? It sort of looked that way because surely that was just the logical thing.
Well, what's worse, a fine at that level when you're already a millionaire, or the wrath of Tuchel?
Probably the wrath, I would say.
The wrath.
Yeah, Tuchel's comments about having to drive up to Leeds were quite interesting post-match as well. Seemed to be a bit of a problem. Well, I think they said there was some kind of issue with the flight. The players were able to fly from London to Yorkshire, but the coaching staff weren't. They had to go by road.
How long is it by road?
3.5 hours.
And how long is it by Sky?
Probably half an hour.
Don't they have to go through all the luggage and stuff? You have to go through. I mean, I'm not taking suitcases, but you know what I mean. They don't have to go through security.
You're talking about the players here.
There's the whole point of.
I don't think the players do. Isn't that a big reason why they like to use planes? Isn't it? Because they get to.
But you know how when you go away somewhere on a plane, you have to get to the airport early, and then you have to go through security, and then you have to do all that nonsense, and it's like 2 hours, and to travel to like Heathrow from you is like an hour and a half. And you're like, oh, I could have just got a train the whole way.
I presume they have contingency plans for this sort of stuff, right? But I'm led to believe that if you fly up in a private jet, you don't need to do all of that security stuff, so it makes it a lot quicker.
Do you think having a coach rather than a flight is going to make a big difference to the coaching staff, Seb?
I don't know. My mind goes to that Athletic article that was published recently where they did a kind of a accountancy of excuses made by Premier League managers. And I remember Thomas Tuchel finishing top of that. So another one for the list, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's inconvenient whether it affects the result. I mean, none of the things that happened on Sunday seem directly attributable to travel issues.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, what do you think of Chelsea just now? They haven't looked amazing so far. You watched the Spurs game as well.
Well, it's kind of 50-50 between hugely impressed by some parts of their game, but really worried about particularly defensive set pieces. One of the things that got lost out of the Spurs game because there was so much refereeing controversy, rightly, because there were some bad decisions, but Chelsea defended the 2 Spurs goals incredibly poorly. They're really self-inflicted wounds. And I've only seen highlights of this game. I was watching West Ham Brighton during it, but seemed like more of the same. A lot of weird decisions. Like the Koulibaly second yellow was a very strange decision. Beyond the actual goals, like the idea that the game is lost, and in that situation on a yellow card, you decide to make that choice so that you're suspended next week. It's weird.
For those who haven't seen it, what he does is there's a player almost getting away from him, and he comes across him, doesn't really need to, puts his arms around him, so it's obviously going to be a yellow card.
Yeah.
He should. Did he just forget he's on a yellow? He looked genuinely sad as well after it happened. I felt bad for him.
I feel like also, JJ, that it's an incomplete squad. There's clearly a few things the club want to do in the next 10 days of transfer window. And it has that sort of transient feel to it, both in the sense of like some of the noise we're hearing out of the club, but also some of the systems you're seeing on the pitch. That forward line doesn't quite work, I don't feel, at the moment. Defensively, I don't quite think they have the players that they would have liked ahead of the summer, knowing that they were going into a kind of a period of extensive defensive rebuilding. It's been a little bit underwhelming. And midfield, like you take Kovacic and Kante out of that midfield, it's still a real problem. And you just
it loses a lot of energy. This is what I noticed. There's
sure.
an energy. Conor Gallagher as well had a really low. This is a really nerdy thing to say, but like a low pass accuracy is like 75%ish, I think, which is super low in that midfield. He was maybe struggling to deal with the intensity of what's going on with Leeds. He's not used to playing in that big possession game. So Crystal Palace last season, very much playing not mostly in possession. I mean, they tried to change a little bit under Vieira last season. We're not on Crystal Palace. And so the players I linked with, like Wesley Fofana, if he comes in, he could go right side of centre back, which pushes Reece James instantly to being a wing back. And I think he's their best attacking player at the moment, Reece James. He's one of the only ones getting in behind, penetrating the lines. He was caught offside, I think, I don't know if it's more than any other player, but he's offside about 3 or 4 times, which is not ideal for him. I'm looking at your cat, Seb. There we go. Reece James getting in behind, that's really important. Frankie de Jong is a really strong link. That's another thing. And at the end of this game, Tuchel had basically abandoned any sort of form of what I would call tactical structure and gone for a chaos card with who is it? The midfield was like Pulisic, Ziyech.
There was Ruben Loftus-Cheek was moved in there at one point.
He was playing as a 10 for a lot of it. Yeah.
Do you think one of the things with Gallagher is I remember speaking to Dom Fifield about him last season when he was at Palace, and one of the things there, if you think about the players he had outside him, so he's playing on the right of a 3 in midfield, but he had Joel Ward, he had Jordan Ayew. He's quite conservative players by sort of Chelsea standards, and so there's a little bit more onus for him to be more vertical, more hectic, more chaotic, because he was a kind of disruptive force, obviously a really super good footballer too, but it's a very different role at Chelsea, because Loftus-Cheek has come in and he's obviously not an orthodox wing back. There's obviously a variation if Reece James
I would go ahead
plays
and
on that
say
side.
he's not a wing back.
Yeah, I agree, but in the way that he's used at the moment, like he's a sort of quasi wing back, isn't he? Because of kind of his possessional abilities, and that worked really well against Spurs. But Gallagher's got to do a little bit of relearning if he's to be a kind of a first team regular at Chelsea this season, just because the pieces are different and the way that team plays is different.
The most surprising thing for me about Gallagher was that he looked a bit off the ball, Tim. Like he just looked a bit short of the kind of buzz and spark that I associate with him. Like he seems to make things happen normally, but he seemed a bit, I don't know, it's something. In fact, the whole Chelsea team are a bit kind of quiet.
Yeah, I think that goes back to Seb's point earlier about, the systems in place and attack, not quite having the players that they want yet. Does Gallagher fit into that? There's been quite a few suggestions that he might be let out on loan as well. I don't know if this is a bit of an audition for him, but it didn't particularly go very well.
It's first start for him as well, I think, isn't it? Yeah. John, you are a huge Jesse Marsch fan and won't stop talking about how much you love all the things he does, especially for Leeds, your beloved Leeds.
Well, when he joined, we actually just had to stop him because it was boring. Jesse Marsch.
Murals. Remember when he turned the studio into a mural? Do you remember that?
WhatsApping me at 3 a.m. to talk about Jesse Marsch. It's just not the way we do things at Tifo, John.
Yeah, we get it, John.
Yeah.
But
just wish you celebrated my loves,
Yeah, well, we were trying.
My desires too.
We're trying now. Joe's not here. We can do what we want. Yeah. We can keep the mural up. But is this an example of everything that he puts in place working exactly as it should? Was it a bit of luck involved? What happened? Because we're talking about Chelsea a bit here, but Leeds were magic.
Yeah, this for me was a game all about tempo. So Leeds, obviously, as we've said, super high intensity, high press, just putting pressure on the ball. And yeah, the whole of Jesse Marsch's approach is such an outlier that it's worth saying that, if you think back to that game and think, what did Leeds actually do in possession? The answer is not a lot. They scored the one goal from open play, and that was the third goal when Chelsea were pushing forward a little bit. The first goal, as we've said, it comes from from the Mendy incident, however you read it, and then the second one comes from a set piece. So Jesse Marsch is not too concerned about possessing the ball as a way of controlling games.
Like a ghost.
Yeah, exactly. So that it's
Make him move with his mind.
You've talked about direct play. You've talked about like vertical play. It's about getting the ball forward quickly. If you turn the ball over, then having a counter press which can, pick up the ball and then benefit from these destabilized moments where the defense is all over the place. And that's, I think, diametrically opposed to what it was that Chelsea were doing. Now, Chelsea are the opposite, I think. Like Thomas Tuchel loves to hold the ball. He loves to progress the ball through the thirds.
First phase was so slow, I thought.
It's just super slow. It's really slow, and I find quite ponderous build-up play. And I think the issue that we've seen from Tuchel from the last few seasons in the Premier League is that his teams are really good at progressing the ball to the final third. When they get to the final third, they sort of run out of ideas. And I think part of the problem is, this is really important, I think, when it comes to this game in particular, is that the way that Jesse Marsch has his team playing so intensely and pushing forward and committing to the press leaves a huge amount of space at the back that can be got at if you get into those spaces quickly. Now, the problem with Chelsea being super slow in their build-up is that by the time they get to the final third, Leeds have dropped into a decent defensive shape. So you're almost making it easier for them. You're saying, okay, we're going to be struggling. We're going to keep the ball in our own third as long as possible, giving you every chance to press as well. But then we're also not going to try and benefit from the flip side of that for Leeds, which is being open at the back in those moments. So this was a game that I did a preview podcast on this for a Leeds podcast, and I talked about tempo. I said, this is where the game is going to be won and lost. It's going to be the fact that Chelsea aren't going to put Leeds under enough problems when they are in possession of the ball, and Leeds are going to cause Chelsea plenty of problems of their own. So yeah, this is Red Bull football, and this is what is good about Red Bull football. But I think there was a little bit of luck involved as well. There's the Mendy incident. You get a set piece. Now, obviously, set pieces are important to this approach play as well. But if you actually look at the XG plot line, that you see these sort of plot lines where it goes along and up. There's basically two moments where Leeds caused problems. The rest of the time there was barely anything. But that's how this works. It's what we were talking about before with City and Newcastle. It's about leveling the playing fields. When you're playing against these big sides, you have to do something to pull them down to your level. And Jesse Marsch has done that really well in this game.
As well, and counter that as well. Like Tuchel, sorry Seb, like Tuchel, you can almost see parallels with what Guardiola's trying to do with controlling it by keeping it slow and maintaining that order. You prevent the sorts of goals that they let in, but they lost control with the two goals, so they sort of threw it away. What were you going to say, Seb?
I was just going to ask John, JJ, what happens in this game if Chelsea take the lead? Like, what do Leeds look like after that?
I think it's a good question. I think Leeds could have played exactly the same way and lost the game. That's what happens when you play against teams with players of this ability and caliber. And so that's what I think is going to be so interesting about Leeds this season, is that I think they'll play like that against some teams, and some teams will be better suited to be able to play against it. So what they'll do is they'll play it over the press. They'll say, well, there's no way we're going to be able to take Leeds on in terms of their pressing play. So we'll play over the top and we'll put them under immediate pressure in their back line. And Leeds will, we've seen it happen against Southampton. Like, Southampton are a much worse team than Chelsea, and they came from 2 goals down to pull level last weekend. This weekend, Chelsea just didn't have the ability to just tear up their tactical blueprint and just go long and just try and pin Leeds back. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one, but it is outlier football. You can't judge it by the way that we judge most of what happens in the Premier League, because it's just so different.
I've enjoyed this chat so much that I think I need a break. We're back. Tottenham 1-0 Wolves. Tim, you know about Wolves because you used to cover them a lot.
Sort of, yes.
What's going on with Wolves here? So Bruno Lage is trying to change them to be more of a possession-based team. Switch from the back three Nuno's had into a 4. Is it just to deal with the threat of Tottenham's front 5 that he changed back to this back 3, or is he going to switch systems during the season, do you think?
No, I think that was very much a one-off to cover Perisic. So Neto was sort of sacrificed. So they were a 5 without the ball, but very much a 4 with it. Wolves played some really, really nice football in the first half. Front foot, possession based. Nunes slotted pretty seamlessly into the midfield. I thought he had a decent game. It's just the same old problem with Wolves, is everything's fine until the final third, which is something they really need to rectify, because their goals record is just atrocious.
How do they fix it? Is it as easy as saying buy a striker? People always say buy a striker, but is it chance creation? Is it the speed of the tempo getting the ball into the final third?
They do have a really good striker on their books by the name of Raul Jimenez, but they've got this issue where Jimenez suffered this horrific fractured skull. This feels like a long time ago now. He was out for 9 months, and then they sort of gave him last season to try and get back to his old self. Didn't really happen, but they do feel that with 9 months of football in his legs, he'll be the man this season. They are trying to sign a striker as well. They've got so many good players in so many good areas. I mean, they've brought in Nathan Collins from Burnley for £20 million. I thought he had a fantastic game. I know he sort of let Harry Kane go for the goal, but other than that, him and Kilman are a really good, probably underrated back two partnership. The midfield, Neves, Vitinha, Nunes. There's so much technical brilliance there. And then they've got loads of very, very good, skillful players out wide, like Neto, Guedes, who they've just signed, Pedence, Hwang Hee-chan, Adama Traore for something different. There are a lot of very.
Let's talk about Adama Traore. Come on. Now. What is he? So I compare him quite to Allan Saint-Maximin in that he has this incredible ability to go past people and you can hardly contain him, but his output is low. Do Wolves fans love this guy? What do they think of him? Because Newcastle fans love Saint-Maximin. And I can see exactly why you would. It's so fun to watch, right? But then with Traore, he did okay at Barcelona. He had a couple of games where he had a couple of assists, but then couldn't get in the team. He's not a Barcelona player, probably. Is he a Wolves player?
I don't think anymore. I don't think with what Largey's trying to do. He worked brilliantly under Nuno when Wolves were very much a counter-attacking team. Didn't really like the ball, happy to sit deep and hit teams on the break. Now they've gone another way, so their possession stats have rocketed this season up to their 60% possession in the first two games. They're 50% at Spurs, which is pretty good, really. So I'm not sure where he fits in, other than being a jester type,
like a wild card
for the last 10 minutes. But he's certainly fallen down to the back of the pecking order. But I do like what Large is trying to do. He looked to sort of instigate some of these ideas last season, but quickly realised that he had Nuno's players. And I thought it was pretty smart management, actually, because a few games into the season, he was like, okay, I need to buy myself some time here, get some results on the board. Yeah. So he went back to Nuno's deep line 3-4-3. Now it's all about four at the back. That's all they've played with exclusively in pre-season. Just needs a couple of players to bring that to life.
We know how every manager comes in and says they want to play attractive attacking football, which Lage did at Benfica, I think.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
So he wants to try and do this, but you need the best players to be able to do that. So if every manager and every team is playing attractive attacking football, who's going to win? Like, is it better? So as a fan, right? So you watching Wolves, not saying you're a Wolves fan, I don't know if you are. Do you support Wolves?
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to wear my Wolves shirt today, but then I've got something to do later. So I thought wearing my 1989 Mendes Steve Bull shirt was probably not appropriate.
You could wear it. It's my dad's name, Steve Bull.
You see it?
I'd love to. My dad isn't Steve Bull.
I'd love to meet him just on that basis alone.
Get him on FaceTime. No, but what I'm trying to ask, I think, is that if you're at the detriment to your team's results, if you're changing from the style of play that gets you results but isn't great to watch, and often you're up against it in that 3-4-3 counter-attack system, is it better to watch a team progress into this more possession-based team, even if it means you're going to lose a bunch more games? Do you know what I mean?
There's probably a balance between the two, and I think Wolves will look to switch between the two formations and systems, and I think we'll see against better teams. They probably will sit a little bit deeper and go for the counter-attack. They have got players that can do that. They've missed. Diogo Jota was like a huge miss for the past two seasons. They need someone direct running at defenders.
Was Pedro Neto, was he not injured for a while? Because I really rate him, and he looks to be coming back into it. His per 90 numbers last season, his XA and XG, was really high.
Yeah, so he broke his kneecap, which was extremely painful. And
did the mafia catch up with him? Did they?
Yeah. So he had. Yeah. If George Mendes,
can I talk about that? I mean, I know it doesn't exist, but
if George Mendes wants you to sign a new contract, there are certain lengths that he may or may not go to. Probably wouldn't go to. Let's just say that for legal reasons. So yeah, he had 10 months out. Came back towards the end of last season, but it was mostly just about building up his fitness. But yeah, looking forward to seeing what he's got to do this season, because his ceiling is ridiculous. I would rate him higher than Jota, and I know a lot of people who've worked with him would say exactly the same.
Yeah, I really like him a lot. Oh my God, Sirius has started talking at me because someone said something that's really annoying. We've got earphones in to talk to Seb, you see, that's really annoying that's happened. Anyway, no one else knows that's happened, blah, 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 blah. Pedro Neto, distracted by that. Siri just actually shouted at me about something to do with Pedro Neto. Seb, what I noticed from Pedro Neto is he did a very good job on even Perisic in this game. But what did you make of Spurs and generally what Perisic has brought to them on that left side rather than Sessegnon?
A little bit early to tell with Perisic. I think the thing that's caught attention so far has been delivery, two-footed delivery from set pieces. Also, there's a little bit of organisation that he does. If you watch Perisic off the ball and you watch the way he talks to his teammates and you watch kind of the things that go on around him, having that level of experience, it's like having a traffic cop in that area of the pitch. It's kind of handy for Spurs because
A traffic cop.
well, a little bit because it's like it's someone directing things. I don't want to go with coach on the field; it's too much of a cliche. So I went with traffic cop. Tried it out. I just put it, float it, see what happens.
I think you opted for the word cop rather than
Traffic policeman sounded clumsy and a bit too much like something that I might say. So I thought again, change it up.
just trying new things today, Seb, aren't you?
Absolutely. I think Spurs generally were a little bit average here. I came away being very, very impressed by Wolves. I thought they were excellent. Also thinking if they did have a fully fit Raul Jimenez, Wolves would have scored probably a couple in the first half. The thing I'd say is that there's a couple of issues that Conte is trying to navigate at the moment. The first is that Son has returned from pre-season very heavy-legged, which happens. He's played awful lot of football. Probably no one does more miles in a season than Son, given his international obligations and kind of given the burden on him. But that feeds into a positive in that previously with Spurs, two things would have happened in that game. It would have become very Son Kane centric and increasingly desperate. The second thing is that there would have been no goal because when they're in that kind of mood and everything's a little bit slow, ball circulation was very ponderous from Tottenham. I thought they didn't have the set piece expertise to get themselves out of jail, and I felt that was the difference. Not to go too sort of hard with the praise of Vio, just because the novelty of having a set piece coach. There's an interesting moment for me on Saturday when I was watching the game. Wolves conceded a corner. I was just on the way to the fridge from the living room to get something to drink. I thought, no, I'm going to watch the corner because they're interesting now. Because Spurs, you know how every supporter thinks that their team is the worst at corners ever in the world. My team is terrible at corners, never score from corners, first man, overhit, etc. There are lots of really interesting things, and as per the game at Stamford Bridge last week, if you watch the corner that Tottenham score from and watch what Via does with the centre halves, he creates this kind of seal. So you've got Davis, you've got Sanchez, and you've got Dyer, all going to the near post, sealing off all of the Wolves players apart from Nathan Collins, who's left in a one-on-one with Harry Kane. And like Tim mentioned it's a mistake. He kind of flinches a little bit. Kane gets ahead of him, but it's just going to happen. Kane's a really, really good player, and his movement is exceptional in that position. He's a great finisher. And that's really the one moment of absolute quality that Spurs produced. And that was the difference. And that feels like where they are, not playing particularly well, getting results, getting goals, getting points at important moments. And I think there's still a little bit, I think there's still a little bit to do in the transfer market because I think you need a little bit, I'm not sure Mora is quite the player that Conte needs him to be in this system. He's very predictable versus someone like Kulusevski. Gilles is not going to get minutes. It's a little bit light at the top of the pitch, but they're in a good position. I mean,
The cat's getting up.
Yeah, he's having a stretch. Watch the way he stretches. It's really funny.
Oh, he's nice.
If he does it.
I recommend watching this podcast because look at Luca. He's nice. Someone else who's nice is Morgan Gibbs-White. And he has been sold for £42.5 million to Nottingham Forest. I'll just explain.
Crikey. It's 25 up front. I don't think it won't get to 42. So
That's all add-ons.
There's some very unrealistic add-ons in there.
Is he worth that money? Was it high potential?
He's not. You're still paying for potential. He's not actually really done anything at Wolverhampton Wanderers in terms of the first team. I mean,
also, we did a video, remember? I remember that. We did a video together, but you talked about... So I thought in my head Gibbs-White is a central midfielder. That's why I remember him. They've been playing him wide right recently.
That's where he started. Wolves never trusted him in that midfield two in their 3-4-3. He just literally never played there. But he's never been a sort of a right winger in his career. So he's had to learn that role. Basically did it at Sheffield United on the job last season. And that's what Forrest are paying for, what he did at Sheffield United last season, which was a great season in the Championship. I did always think that Gibbs-White, in the mould of like Maddison and others, needed that full season in the Championship. So Maddison had a full season at Norwich, didn't he? And Mount went to Derby,
Aberdeen,
and
you're thinking of.
there
He
it
scored
is.
a free kick, top corner against Rangers.
That free kick, yeah, it's amazing
course.
free kick for anyone who hasn't seen it. Yeah.
But he was a YouTube player at Aberdeen. Like he couldn't properly get in the first team, Madison. He would be okay, but drift in and out of games. Wasn't involved as much as a midfielder should be. Didn't really create a chance to do that. It's a kind of strange league sometimes as well.
Didn't have that cinch in him, did he? What's the problem?
No, we're not going to the cinch thing. And let's stay with Tim. Sorry.
Yeah, and Mason Mount at Derby and Harvey Barnes, and Gibbs-White just needed that. He was only getting minutes off the bench at Wolves, and he needed to play regularly. I mean, they are paying for potential. It's a sort of a calculated risk from Wolves to let him go, but with that kind of money, and quite boring. But he had 2 years left on his contract, and he just didn't want to talk about having a new one. And he knows Steve Cooper at Forrest really well. They won the Under-17 World Cup together, and he played for him at Swansea briefly. So he was very keen to go and work with Steve Cooper again.
How did he get on in the weekend, Seb? Did he play for Forrest this weekend?
Yeah, he came on as a sub. He had a couple of brilliant touches. There was one moment, when you have a fixed idea of a player and then you see him do something and it just completely changes. He had one of those against Everton. Came on, took the ball like in the kind of near left position, about 10 yards inside the Everton half, and just took one touch and burst through 2 Everton defenders and just was a good player. Didn't have much of it because I feel like Forrest were a little bit, after they scored their goal, they became a little bit sort of defensive, and throughout the game actually they needed Dean Henderson to play really, really well to get their point. But he looks like a good player. Like I don't really have an opinion on the fee, just because whenever you see a British player, and you obviously a British player being signed by a club that needs reinforcement, inverted commas, needs for Forest.
I think it's English player. I think we can limit it to English rather than British.
Yeah,
it's them.
I suppose
they struggle to get money for it.
I mean, I would say that it's just like Nathan Collins commanded a big fee. And he's Irish. Yeah, so no, but sort of British and Irish, like not necessarily homegrown, but players that I suppose a particular type of manager trusts in British football. Like that's probably the clumsy way to put it, but there is a little bit of premium that applies to all of them. He looks like a really good footballer. I've seen him play age group football, but I've long ago kind of stopped judging people within that context because it's such a false economy. But yeah, he looks like an asset because he looks like a player that does things that nobody else of that position in that Forest squad can do at the moment. They signed Remy Fuller, who's more of a possession-based player. Not going to be able to kind of burst past defenders. He's not going to be vertical. So yeah, he had a kind of we'll call it a cameo. That's the best way of putting it, I think.
Let's move on to Serie A. Sorry, I'm laughing because I was imagining you saying it for there's not going to be vertical, like he's a sideways man.
Well, he's sort of Remy Fuller, like when he receives the ball,
he can't grow tall.
He's not going to take players on really, like he's a passing player. Whereas,
I meant his height though.
Yeah,
I was being silly.
I've
ruined the podcast again. Let's move on to Serie A. On last week's pod, listener Sal Architetto, I hope you said your name. I've said your name.
I feel like you need to put some accent into that, JJ.
I'm not doing that because I don't know what you're allowed to do. And commented, I'd love if you guys would deep dive more into Serie A. Well, Sal, grab yourself an espresso. Is that what you've written?
Oh, yeah.
Steve's written. I'm trying to keep this so it's sensible. Well, Sal, grab yourself a normal food or item that anyone might have in this Western globalized world. Because next up, we're going to talk Calcio. And we're back from a break. Serie A, Juventus haven't won the Scudetto for 2 seasons. What happened to them? John Mackenzie's going to tell you soon in a video on Tifo IRL. And both Milan clubs look strong. There are as many as 4 title contenders this year. Milan, Inter, Milan, Juventus, Roma. Need to add Napoli to this group, in my opinion, John Mackenzie.
You're just going to read out everything in writing.
I might.
I could abuse this. But yeah, really interesting. You mentioned that I'm bringing out a video later in the week. But I think the thing isn't just that Juventus haven't won Serie A for 2 seasons. It's that before that they won 9 consecutive titles. And it suddenly blown open, and we've got teams.
There's hope for the Bundesliga yet.
yeah. But yeah, I think that this is going to be a fun title challenge because you've got the 2 Milan teams doing well. AC Milan playing a very different brand of football, so really high intensity, heavy pressing, but also like really, really quick transitions as well. So that's fun. Inter doing the things that they were doing when Conte was around still, and looking like probably the best team in terms of that sort of build up control. You've got Juventus, who they've sort of had this weird trajectory where they wanted to modernise to try and perform better in the Champions League, and brought in originally Maurizio Sarri and then Andrea Pirlo. And because the numbers were bad for the Pirlo season, they sort of panicked and went running back to Max Allegri, who was the manager at the time when they decided that they weren't going to win the Champions League. And so they're sort of this big grandee club who you expect to see in the Champions League season in, season out. But it almost feels as though they've put themselves at the back of the queue just by doing something that was on paper quite smart. So yeah, that's fascinating as well. We've got Roma with Jose Mourinho, who we all know you're a big fan of. You do like him, don't you?
Yeah, I'm sort of indifferent. I think he's a very, very talented manager, one of the best of all time.
But you're excited about his Roma, right?
I think it's interesting watching a master of his craft build something, being allowed to put the bits together. Like he's put a lot of new players into there. I think they got the improved last season. I think Alex did the videos last season. Alex Stewart, you may recall of who that is. I'm sure you do, because we like Alex. He's not here. John's here now. How's it going?
Well, this isn't awkward at all, but
not at all. No.
Napoli is the final name that I added to that list.
Right, sure.
They've had some really fun transfers this window. They absolutely battered Monza yesterday 4-0, and they brought in some really fun players. Kvicha Kvaratskhelia.
Company.
Huh? Yeah, that's right. Monzo. Don't joke. It won't be long before NatWest will be in the Premier League probably. But the Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, this Georgian player who everyone's been talking about.
Oh, he was brilliant yesterday.
Yeah,
really good.
A really exciting player. We've lost JJ. I'm just going to plow on here. They've brought in Min-Jae Kim from Fenerbahce, a centre back. He scored yesterday. Frank Andres Zambo Anguissa we'll know from Fulham. He was made into a permanent contract. He's a really exciting player. Matias Oliveira from Getafe. Raspadori from Sassuolo, again another hipster name that people are excited about. Tanguy Ndombele, who we know from Spurs. It's just really, really exciting players all the way down. So I think they're going to be. I don't know how well they're going to perform, but they're definitely going to be fun.
Did you know that?
Sorry, Sam.
No, I was going to say, did anybody know that Ademola Lookman had signed for Atalanta? I was watching that game over the weekend, and on he came, and I had absolutely no idea that he'd moved. I missed it completely. Atalanta played really well, by the way. Very, very unfortunate just to get a point against AC Milan.
Well, the one I can add in with some information is that Gino Wijnaldum went to Roma and has now broken his tibia, which is in the leg. Yes.
I want to say that's is that the lower bit of the leg? Femur's the higher bone in the leg.
It's the tibia and the fibula. They're the two bones in the shin, right?
Okay.
I don't know which one's which. But
and the femur's kind of thigh, I think.
Hankles has got something to say about
this.
Come on, Hankles.
Apparently, a tibia is also known as the shank bone.
That's a Scottish player, the shank bone. Lawrence Shankbone.
The shank bone. So there we go.
Tim, do you think Serie A is going to be as good as the 90s?
Yes.
There we go. A deep dive in Serie A there. Well, not quite a deep dive, but a substantial splash.
I learned something about Serie A yesterday. So
tell me.
One of my favourite games of the weekend is the early game in Italy because it kicks off at 11:30 UK time. And I got all upset because I was looking through the fixture list and it appeared to me as if that fixture had been scrubbed because it wasn't on the calendar. Actually, what I found out, which I should have known a long time ago, is that doesn't exist until September because it's too warm in August to play that game in that time slot. Same in Spain, apparently. So a bit of knowledge acquired on a Sunday.
I feel like I have learned. So now I must have another break to learn it more. Yes, we're back again. Brighton 2-0 West Ham. I believe you watched this, Seb, didn't you?
Yeah, West Ham.
West Ham haven't scored goals yet.
No, so West Ham 0-2 Brighton. Bit worrying for West Ham. To me, they feel like a team stuck between stations because the most effective and most comfortable counter-attacking. They faced a Brighton team who are firstly really, really good in possession, also really, really good at having possession and organising themselves in a way which doesn't allow counter-attacking, which is the key thing. And West Ham looks super lost. couple of like minor issues within there as well. Like I think the phrase for Mikel Antonio might be wear and tear. He looks pretty jaded, heavy legged, however you want to describe it. Also, that Antonio Scamacca dynamic is weird. So Moyes played both of them for about 25 minutes on Sunday. Brought Scamacca on, and I don't know. They represent kind of different schools of thought, don't they? Because Antonio's a counter-attacking player. It's like a sort of there's so many things well, particularly in channels though. Scamacca, you want things to gather around him. He's not a target man as such because he's a really complete cultured footballer, but it feels like they're trying to do two things at the same time and it's not quite working. So and shouldn't be judged on this because I think he's a good player, but you look had a terrible debut, gave away the penalty in the first half, also got caught dropping when the rest of the defensive line was stepping up for the Trossard goal. So a bit of a chemistry issue there. Kurt Zouma had a bad game. One thing I didn't realise is that there are quite a few West Ham fans who have fallen out of love with Thomas Souček and a bit negative about his contribution in midfield, which I had completely missed because I still think of him as a kind of like, oh, you got to have him in my fantasy team. He'll score a goal from a set piece, but not that popular at the moment. And
he's not scoring goals from set pieces.
Not scoring goals from set pieces, but it feels a bit clunky in that area. And I don't know if that is about Souček, but ball progression is not what it needs to be for West Ham to kind of make use of. Like, think about sort of the attacking players they've got around the centre forwards. It's not working at the moment. I mean, they're unlucky against Man City, and Forrest really unlucky because they really should have won that game. This was not terrific. So we'll see. Maybe David Moyes will bring a couple of players in. I don't know.
Well, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, good question.
Well, is it West Ham? Are they poor this season? Brighton are really good. We can talk about Brighton in a bit. But what do you see in West Ham this season? What are they missing? Is it?
I feel like we're seeing a bit of a theme with certain teams that have still got a bit of business to do left. Yeah, and this is the season where the season has started the earliest into the window before, I think. So there's like some teams have got to play 5 Premier League matches before the window closes.
Because of the World Cup, right?
Yeah, and you've got teams like Arsenal who are pretty settled. Spurs have done business very early. They've made good starts. Brighton, Brentford, again, seem very settled. And then you've got other teams who've still got some important recruitment to do who are struggling. Maybe that's just a bit of a generalisation, but it certainly seems the case with some teams, West Ham being one. I mean, Scamacca and Cornet need to be integrated into that 11, sooner rather than later. I'm told the boos were very, very loud at full time. Yeah. The loudest they've been for quite a while.
Which is impressive in that stadium.
Yeah, absolutely.
Generating any kind of atmosphere.
To hear it, actually.
Well, how do you think Moyes wants his team to play? Like, what do you think he wants West Ham to look like?
Perhaps he's going to be, like Seb was saying, a little bit stuck in between what's done well for West Ham in the past and what he wants to do in the future. And they definitely do look a bit jaded, whether that's an after effect of a very, very busy season.
But I think this with David Moyes' teams is that they tend to look a bit boring and like nothing's really happening, and they're efficient. So they will play for set pieces a lot, and they'll make use of height often. Always quite physically strong, like strong, not maybe rapidly quick as a lot of his teams, but they get things done in a certain patient, methodical way without anything exciting. Like very much, you look at Newcastle, high press against Man City. You look at Wolves changing to have total control that game against Spurs, so they put Jimenez on, losing a bit of control there. Like quite clear identities. West Ham maybe between them, like we're saying. Brighton though are absolutely flying. So they've beaten Man United, obviously, drew with Newcastle, which that's okay. But here, this is a good win for them. How long? What's the question about this? Are Brighton good? Are they going to be in that top 5?
I just have one thing there, JJ, because it feels like we should caveat concerns about West Ham. When you lose at home to Brighton, there are a couple of forces at work. Firstly, people are still of the mindset that Brighton are a small, newly promoted team, which is not really true to what they've become. They've developed and progressed so much since they moved up to the Premier League. But also, like, I suppose as a fan watching your team lose to them, you're watching a team that are really good with the ball, really attractive, a lot of sensible signings, a lot of stuff that works basically, and it creates a really unflattering contrast, which is probably quite antagonistic. And I feel like Brighton are in that place where, as opposed to West Ham, who kind of need counter-attacking opportunities for their old way of playing to work, Brighton just are comfortable having the ball, which sounds like a simple thing, it's amazing how many teams are not comfortable just having the ball, that don't
Yeah.
really know what to do with it, who are kind of dependent on game state to either create or score goals, or to feel comfortable in leads, or to exploit weaknesses. And Brighton are not one of them. And by the way, Danny Welbeck, super on Sunday. It's so nice to see him play well. He just looks, he was absolutely excellent. He's so he's such a selfless forward. He's so willing to work, and he does it with all this elegance. It was a really fun player to watch, and really nice to watch him play well in a quite a big game for Brighton.
Well, on Welbeck, go to you again, Tim. Brighton, they keep the ball very well. They have a player like Welbeck. They still struggle to score goals. Are they another teams that need to, or they're missing this final piece of the puzzle to be able to make things happen?
Potentially. I mean, if Danny Welbeck's going to be fit for the season, then probably not. Although it seems like they're quite willing to let Neil Maupay go. That particular experiment hasn't
They're
worked.
quite different, right? Welbeck's probably more suited to a high pressing system. He can offer you multiple things with the channels. Maupay is more of a poacher, would you say?
Yeah, true. I guess you'd also look at their really good start and see that they've played Man United and West Ham, two teams who are in a lot of trouble at the moment. But it always has kind of felt like the missing piece is a striker for Brighton. But some of the football they play would maybe disprove that. Graham Potter seems to go about things in a different way. They've got some really, really nice footballers. They're very, very nice to watch.
John, how long until Graham Potter is the manager of who's in trouble? Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool have had a bad start. Where's he going next?
I would love to see him at a top club. I think he's an excellent manager, and like Seb's saying, like a lot of the narratives about Brighton are that people don't expect them to be very good at all, but they're excellent. He's super flexible. I think his teams can switch between formations. They can play high pressing football if they need to, which they did against Manchester United, went man for man. They can also sit in a really solid mid block as well. They can move between a back three or a four and do so in a way that I think is functional, which a lot of teams don't. I just think he's a super smart manager, and I would argue that Brighton possibly the best team outside the top six at the moment, which seems irreverent or something, or controversial. But then, like, who are we saying that is at the moment is better than Brighton?
I suppose define your terms, just because I don't disagree actually, that they're the team that I've admired the most watching this season outside the top six. And also I'm interested by what Undav brings when I'm not quite sure what the plan is there. Scored a lot of goals in Belgium. Slightly unorthodox person, like a looking footballer, has a kind of strange gait. It looks a little bit like Vincent Janssen in a way, which I'm prone to distrust. But that's a facility they didn't have previously at the top of the pitch. And I'm really impressed by the fact that they've lost Basuma, they've lost Cucurella, and they haven't missed a step. And it shouldn't surprise. I mean, look at who they've beaten away from home over the last few months. Man United and West Ham, but Arsenal and Spurs within 2 weeks of each other at the end of last season as well. That's just a good team. There's no caveat. It's not, we're not waiting to be disproved. They are just good. And seemingly getting better the more comfortable and long-term Graham Potter's tenure becomes. So, yeah, good.
Well, someone or something, some people who are comfortable are Paris Saint-Germain, because over in Ligue 1 on the weekend, it was Lille 1 on 7. Yes?
Yes.
Lille 1 7 PSG. PSG. I'm trying to say Lille 1-7 PSG. Wow. So 2 seasons ago, for context, for anyone who wasn't sure, Lille won the league with Christophe Galtier being in charge of them at the time. He is now the PSG manager. John did a really good video on how PSG might be able to play under him, because he's tend to focus on a 4-4-2, but it's very much it's like a 3-5-2, no, 3-4-3, isn't it?
3-4-3, yeah.
Yeah, to get the front three. And the front three combined for a goal in the first 7 or 8 seconds. Did you watch this game, Tim?
No, but I've heard about this goal and who it's been inspired by, which is remarkable.
Who is it inspired by?
Bournemouth, who did exactly the same thing for a goal last season, I think, from the kickoff.
Real Madrid copied them as well with Ancelotti.
Sparta Rotterdam scored it as well last week. Like it's a kind of, it's not.
Is that right?
Thing. Yeah, people keep copying this goal and scoring it. Yeah, and PSG are just the latest.
So it's one of the attacking players. So Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe are the ones who link, and the goal, you'll be able to find it online. I think it's been tweeted by BT Sport actually. But they combine, and Messi just drops deeper and then hits this first-time ball all over the top for Mbappe to run him behind, who times his run perfectly just to get in behind him and lobs the keeper. It's really, really good. But I mean, this is for context, right? How good PSG look already this season. Neymar has 5 goals and 6 assists in 3 games. Messi has 3 goals and 2 assists in 3 games. Mbappe has 4 goals and no assist in 2 games. It seems very much as well that when Mbappe scored this goal, because the noise in the last week has been that Mbappe's not very happy about something. Don't know what it was. They're trying to keep it all in-house. And then they score and the whole team gathers round. Do you think it's performative, Seb, the way they celebrate? Or is that a genuine, they're trying to prove everyone wrong?
It feels to me like everything PSG do is performative, JJ, just because the noise around them is so incessant and this theme is so repetitive. Like the idea of like, especially Mbappe, what he controls, what he influences, what his relationship with Neymar is. Like if you think about, I mean, this goes back to, do you remember the conversation about Neymar and Cavani during his first season? And there was exactly the same chatter around who's passing to
penalties,
whom.
wasn't it?
Yeah, who's taking penalties and what's his expression when Cavani missed that chance? And it's just the same thing. So I think this becomes part of the job description for a PSG player is like, it's PR as well. Like celebrate a goal and, they're playing really good football. So part of it's organic, but it's just something that you need to do because otherwise in go the headlines and the kind of headline writers and the kind of commentary becomes very, very negative around the club. So it's just, it's what you have to do, I guess.
Well, one of the stars on show in this game is Vitinha, who PSG have signed in the summer window, who used to play for Wolves. What is Vitinha?
What is he? So he's a pretty technically gifted Portuguese midfielder who somehow made his way to Wolves by Jorge Mendes.
In what possibilities
somehow we got that.
It was
how do you know about him? What happened?
Quite a stunning signing out of nowhere. So yeah, he was sort of the right player at the wrong time for Wolves. Really, he was, to use a couple of cliches, but he was a little bit lightweight and couldn't really get to grips with Premier League intensity, and he certainly wasn't ready to play in a midfield 2, and he wasn't a winger either, so he didn't fit in Wolves' formation. So yeah, they chose not to sign him for £20 million. Nuno turned him down, and then so did Bruno Lage as well. Just felt he wasn't quite ready. I mean, in hindsight, what they should have done is signed him and possibly loaned him out, because now he's worth a lot more money.
So easy to say that in hindsight for everyone, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember speaking to someone who worked really closely with him who said he could be a better version of João Moutinho. He's got the intelligence of Moutinho. He can control the tempo of a game like him, but he's got a much better passing range, and he's just as technically gifted. So there are very high hopes for him to have a really nice football career.
Is that a midfield 2 that we'll see in Champions League games from PSG? Because the draw is on Thursday for the groups, right? And you've got Vitinha and Verratti playing that midfield 2. Marquinhos playing a centre back. I guess he could step into.
Yeah, that's what he's been doing. He's in possession as well, just sort of stepping forward into the midfield area and just giving another line of defence ahead of the then back 2, I suppose. But yeah, really interesting because my video is all about how can PSG play a 4-4-2, which is what Christophe Galtier has played most of his career. And he just comes in and straight up plays a 3-4-3, fits in those 3 players. And we've had the perennial arguments, right? Every time we get a new PSG manager, it's how do you fit these 3 players in, Messi, Neymar and Mbappe, and he seems to have done it well. But yeah, I'm with you. I think there's so many teams now around Europe who are looking fantastic in their leagues, and it's hard to know what is going to look like in the Champions League. So Bayern are the same. Like Bayern absolutely tonking everyone in the Bundesliga at the moment. But what are they going to look like when they come up against opposition that can cause them problems? And I think for me at the moment, PSG are still in that camp. Like what are they going to look like against Champions League opponents? But I think it's going to be a really good Champions League iteration this time around because of this.
Well, I feel like because you're here, Tim, I should ask you, unrelated to Vitinha and the Jorge Mendes link, what does Mendes actually do with Wolves? What's his involvement with that? How does that work?
Blimey, how long have we got? Are we going to start the podcast?
I would say
again?
2 minutes. Summarize it in 2 minutes.
So, I mean, people will know of his well-trodden links with other clubs, like sort of, mostly the Portuguese clubs, but also Valencia, Zenit St. Petersburg and whatnot. The difference with Wolves is it's financially beneficial for him and for Wolves to do well because Wolves' owners, Fosun, have a stake in Mendes' Gestifute agency.
Mm-hmm.
which sounds a bit dodgy, but he's completely legal and above board. Jorge Mendes, a very visible presence at Wolves. They don't really hide the fact that he's there quite a lot. He was there for the last home game. He has a number 2 who's pretty much there full time. And yeah, it's derided by a lot of people, the way that Wolves do things, bringing in guest appeal clients, and it does narrow their search when it comes to recruitment. And
Because he would be, how do I word this would make it fine? He would be financially advantageous for him to bring in players that come through his guest appeal company.
absolutely, every single time a deal is done,
Do they buy players outside of that?
Yeah, they do. So they have a fully functioning recruitment and scouting team, and I know that there are frustrations in that team that they scout and research and identify players in a completely normal way and put them forward for suggestion, and then Jorge Mendes will come along and say, "Hey, I've got someone who can do that." Not Nathan Collins. There are examples that come through that aren't guest appeal players.
Is he not Portuguese, Nathan Collins? No.
So I think he did get to the Algarve on holiday once.
Colinho, yeah.
So it works really well for us, particularly the Portuguese thing. I think it certainly helps signings settle better, and they've got a nice little community in Wolverhampton, and it does work for them. I think they'll potentially hit a ceiling quite soon by only narrowing themselves with guest appeal players. I'm not sure that can take you to the.
Well, it depends how many good players get signed up early, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure Ronaldo will turn up at Molineux one day, maybe on one leg, towards the end of his career.
Oh, because Jorge Mendes is his.
Yeah, absolutely. He's number 1.
Jose Mourinho as well.
Jose Mourinho will manage him at Molineux. Bernardo Silva as well. Yeah, they'll all end up there one day. But yeah, it's proved really successful. I know that there are envious eyes from other boardrooms across the country as to how can we get this? How can we get our own sort of Mendes link? Because without him, Wolves might not even be a Premier League club. Let alone.
Well, when they went and put Ruben Neves and Vitinha in that team in the first division,
and Jota, played some of the best Championship football probably ever.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. So there are a lot of advantages to it. You can get Jean Vitinha for 5 million and keep him for 5 years. You get some duds as well, but on the whole, it works pretty well.
Who's now the central midfielder at PSG.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was very interesting. I bet we probably should have asked that earlier and done much more on it, really. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. But we've given them a taster to go and read more of Tim.
Oh, yeah. There's loads. Oh, that's fantastic, wasn't it? There's loads to read about it on theathletic.com.
/Tifo, yeah.
Exactly.
So theathletic.com/Tifo.
If you want to learn more about Jorge Mendes' involvement with Wolves and also other things that Tim writes about, it's not just Wolves, you can do that. And I think you should do that, really. So many great writers, so many. But one of the top 5 is in this room. And that's excellent. So I think we've covered a lot of things. And I think we're good, Seb. Do you feel we're good?
I feel we're good.
Yeah, all right. I like that. Your cat's still sleeping. I like that.
Yeah.
So yes, let's summarize it. Well done, everyone. Thank you, Tim Spiers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stafford-Bloor.
Well, thank you, JJ Paul.
And your good Kates. And thank you to... Are you going to... Oh.
Maybe thank you to Luca the cat. Like, look, he's provided a little bit of background. There he is. He's heard his name.
Oh, heard his name. He's up. Thank you, Luca the cat. Thank you, producer Jamie, doing the video today. And thank you, producer Steve Hankey, who's here doing all the things, making it run. And that's it. See you next time. Keep on trucking.